mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about episode 5 of Apple TV's The Last Days of Ptolemy Gray, entitled Nina. This is another strangely titled episode, as Nina has very few scenes in this episode. I don't really know what makes them choose. Like, I would probably give each of these episodes a different person's name if I could. The first two were pretty solid, Reggie and Robin, but the other ones, I don't know. We didn't see too much of each of those characters, but that's neither here nor there. I'll talk about Nina and a little bit of her that we see later on in this video. But I want to start by talking about what we learned this week, because I think we learned a couple of interesting things about Ptolemy that are worth discussing. The first thing being that he wasn't the great guy that we kind of feel like he has been. We've only known him post, I'll say it's dementia. I'm pretty sure it's dementia. Post-dementia, and since he's got his memory back. We don't know too much about him from prior to that time, other than that he was in love with Essentia. I'm going to keep calling her that. But we find out that he wasn't all that great. He had a daughter named Doris that I believe, from what I gleaned in his speech, he didn't know about her. But when she showed up at his doorstep like, hey, I'm your kid, he played stupid and acted like he didn't know who she was. She must have made a mistake. And he sends her off crying. We come to find out, one, that Cynthia consoled her and almost kind of mothered her in seeing Ptolemy in her face, while he resented her for kind of like upsetting this nice balance that he had in his life with Cynthia. And then we also find out that she killed herself at 42 later. We don't know how much longer that was after she showed up at his doorstep, but I would wager it probably wasn't that much long after the fact. And then we also learned that he wasn't as comfortable with Cynthia having relationships outside of their relationship as he kind of made it sound when he told Robin about it. I think I talked about that in the video for whatever episode that was, saying like, well, apparently she had other dudes and he was cool with it. But apparently he was not as cool with it as he may have led us and Robin to believe. We see a scene where she comes home after hanging out with one of these guys, and he's got a gun in his hand, and he threatens to essentially kill himself over this. And she says something to the effect of like, if you want to die, I'm going to shoot you so that I can go ahead and shoot myself right afterwards. And she basically commits herself to him. And the purpose of the story that he tells at Reggie's eulogy is essentially to let us know that it kind of helps us explain his character, and that why he's been so adamant about finding some sort of retribution or meaning in Reggie's death, because he looks at himself as like, I'm a piece of shit and I'm still here, and Reggie's dead, and this is a guy who was trying to keep his family together, and then also playing this juggling / balancing act of taking care of me when I smelled and my house smelled and it was filthy. It's basically like, it's not fair that this good man with this family is gone and I'm still here and I was a piece of shit. And I think that just adds a little bit more context to why he's so adamant. Like it's his last dying thing. Like, I have to find out and get revenge. And I feel like it's probably not going to end up in revenge in some sort of way, but some sort of closure regarding Reggie's death, because of that situation, the fact that Reggie was so good and he was so not good. But I think those are kind of biggest things that we took away from this episode. I thought those were all pretty revealing things that set up the finale pretty well. There's not a whole lot, but there's a few storylines that we need to close up in this last episode, most of which I'm actually fairly invested in. The only thing I'm not really invested in is Robin and Roger. I don't really like when I feel like shows shoehorn in a relationship that doesn't need to be there. If you're watching something and it feels like this relationship forms organically, that's different. But you only have 6 episodes to tell this story. I don't feel like if you remove the Robin and Roger piece of it, that people are going to look at this and go, man, I sure wish Robin had found some dude to fuck around with. I really don't feel like people are yearning for needless romantic storylines in their shows. But then again, that could just be me. I look at it as needless. Others might look at it as making this a more well-rounded story and a more well-rounded character. But I don't know. I feel like why do we always have to go to this? Like I'm just not interested in like Roger came out of nowhere. I think it was like episode 2 or 3, and all of a sudden she's totally into him. Whereas I might have bought it even more if she fell for the other guy, the one with the glasses. I think it's Billy. Like that guy we've seen fairly consistently. He's been helpful to her. He's been helpful to Ptolemy. Whereas Roger just shows up as like, yeah, let me carry your groceries home. And then all of a sudden they're in love. And I'm like, did we need this? And it could just be the show wanted to be loyal to the book, which maybe has this relationship a little bit more fleshed out and makes it feel a little more necessary than the show does. But I'm not invested in Robin and Roger at all. But aside from that, I also want to talk about a couple of scenes with Ptolemy and Robin as well, because again, I've been saying throughout the course of this show, what makes this show special is Samuel L. Jackson's performance and the chemistry he has with Dominique Fishback, and we see that again this week when I guess we'll kind of start from what Ptolemy discovers. Well, not what he discovers necessarily, but what he remembers, and then we discover via his actions. But Ptolemy goes to meet with this lawyer. Turns out the lawyer's been dead for, I think he said 15 years, so we know Ptolemy's been out of it for a minute. And his son is there. And he basically tells the son, like, I want to draft up this will, and I want to put Robin in charge of it. And he's like, yo, hold on. And he sends Robin out of the room, and him and Ptolemy talk about it. And I guess the guy accepts it. And then Ptolemy goes, yeah, one other thing. And he breaks out the key from the I don't know, it was in a box. The one that he had hidden with the treasure in it, Coy Dog's treasure, that he dug up from underneath his floor. And we saw the coins, but we saw the key, but there was never any mention of the key. Robert says, like, what's that for? He's like, yeah, we'll talk about that later. And then they left that for like 3 episodes. He breaks out the key, and we find out it's the key to a safety deposit box at a bank. The lawyer has the other one. They open it up, and they take out a coin worth $17 million. And then they go, yeah, he's got another 7 of them too somewhere else. I kind of feel like the other 7 are not all worth $17 million, because he said that they were in like a lesser box or something like that. So I'm assuming the other 7 are worth less than that one, and that specific one is the big money one. But shit, man, the other 3 could be worth $40,000. Like, who cares? You got one that's worth $17 million, you're good. But he finds this coin, not finds, he retrieves this coin worth $17 million and reiterates his desire to essentially cash it in and use that money as kind of like part of his will, to where Robin can like disseminate it in the way that he sees fit. He's already crafted up this plan where certain people get certain amounts of money. Nina's and her family, I think he said, will get certain, like he'd give them like a salary where they get certain amount per month. And he has this whole thing figured out. And Robin's not interested. And they go home and they have a little bit of an argument. And what I thought was a really good scene, because Robin talks about, him not taking into account the fact that she's 17 and she doesn't want to bear that level of responsibility for being responsible for $17 million, and then also at least $17 million, and then also making sure that all these various parties get these varied amounts of money routinely. Like, there's a lot of responsibility for a 17-year-old. And I think, again, most 17-year-olds will go, 17 million? All right, I'll do it. But that's not who Robin is, and I like that. And I believe that. Like, we've spent enough time with Robin over the course of these 5 episodes that I'm not sitting here thinking, like, why would she not do that? Like, that she has shown a responsibility and maturity beyond her years. So, the idea of her going like, look, I'm just 17, $17 million. I don't know if you want to trust that to me. I find that believable. And they had another really good scene earlier in the episode that I liked as well, where they talked about Roger, who I don't care about, and their relationship, they being Robin and him. And they talk about love, and he essentially kind of implies like, yeah, y'all love each other. You willing to give it up? He willing to smash? Like, what's going on? What's going on? And he asked her where she learned about love, and she says through him, and she says that she's never loved anyone the way that she loves him, and that if he were younger and she were older, she could see the two of them together, which was still weird, even though she's like, if I was 20 years older and you were 50 years younger, we could maybe beat it. That's still weird. Even if you make the ages work, it's weird for a 17-year-old to say that to, what is he, like 90 in this? Like, for a 17-year-old to say that to a 90-year-old is still weird. I'm sorry. But it was a good scene, though. And again, I'm loving everything I see when those two are having conversations, because you get that energy from Samuel L. Jackson in his voice that you're accustomed to anytime you see him in anything. You get that energy, you get that passion, and then you also get Dominique's giving this vulnerability to Robin. Like I said, this maturity beyond her years to Robin, but they still have this kinship, even though they're so different. And I think it's a really great dynamic, and I can't speak highly enough of how much I've enjoyed the two of them together. What they've done individually, but mainly what they do together, I've really, really enjoyed. Let's see. So, So I have a couple thoughts, but I want to talk about the end of the episode. So we close with Alfred showing up to this eulogy. Alfred is the ex of Nina's that Reggie talked about in episode 1, but we didn't find out what he was saying until like episode 3 or 4. Alfred shows up, and essentially Ptolemy is like, yeah, he snatches his hat off to show that Alfred matches the description that he was given for the person who killed Reggie. And he basically says, I don't want a motherfucker that killed their dad to be raising them. I want to pay you to get the fuck out of here. And he said, meet me at my place tomorrow at 2:00 and I'll break you off some loot. He said 5 times what he gave Nina. We know that he gave Nina $5,000. So that means he's basically offering Alfred $25,000 to skip town, and that'd be that. Of course, it's probably not going to go that way. I also don't think it's going to go away where Ptolemy kills this guy. I think he'll get some sort of closure, but there's a lot to cover in this final episode, because if you remember, episode 1 opened with a scene where we see Ptolemy, I think he was like talking into a tape recorder, and it was a message to Robin, and at the time we didn't know who Robin was, and I think someone was banging on his door. So like we still got a long ways to get to that point. So yeah, excited to see what happens. Again, I feel like this show has been fun. It's moved at a very slow pace. The episode titles are a little weird, but I fairly invested in where the story has gone. But mostly, at the end of the day, I've really enjoyed the performances and the dynamic, and the dynamic between Samuel L. Jackson and Dominique Fishback. I think it's been great. So I'm gonna wrap this up with a couple of thoughts that I had. So about Nina, Tommy seems to suspect that she may have at least been complicit in Reggie's death. He badgers her about where she was, what she knew about Reggie's plans, whether or not he told those plans to Alfred, and it makes me want. Oh, and not to mention he gave her money, so he's also I think it was essentially a bribe, kind of like, I'll give you money to get you here, and then in his head, I'm going to badger you with questions, and I'm going to use that money to where you essentially are kind of like, I think it's like a guilt fee almost. Like you're kind of responsible to, you have to talk to me. I'm giving you $5,000. Let's talk about it. But that's really the extent to which we see Nina this week is that collection of scenes at the end of the episode. And like I said, that just speaks to the strangeness of how they titled these episodes. Like what about this episode? Like, if you're going to name the episode after a person, what about this episode makes me feel like it should be called Nina? And you might not want to call every episode Robin. I get that. But if you're married to this idea of names, talk about somebody who was a little bit more prevalent in the episode. None of these episodes have been about Dr. Rubin. He's been very prevalent in at least 2 of them. He shows up in this one at the eulogy. I don't know. It's just weird how they're naming these. And what was the point of the scene at the very beginning of the episode? We open this episode with a flashback to Coy Dog taking little 7-year-old Ptolemy to what I can only assume is a whorehouse, and he's going to help a girl with her rent. And he goes upstairs with the lady. Ptolemy gets a bath in the middle of this room with a bunch of people, which I thought that was really weird, because I'm trying to vision, like, how do you make this kid get naked where nobody sees it and it's not weird? Like, that's strange. But anyway, Ptolemy takes a bath, and while he's taking this bath, a couple of guys start fighting over a card game, and a woman comes down and stabs the one guy a couple of times, once to the back, once to the chest, I believe. We can presume that this guy's dead. And then Ptolemy tells this story to Robin later. And I wonder what the purpose of this story was. Because there are things we could take away from it. We could take away that Coy Dog is pretty fucking irresponsible. We could take away that Ptolemy has, maybe that's the first time he saw someone killed. Because we know that, he later sees Coy Dog, but we don't know if that's, maybe that was the first time Ptolemy saw a guy killed. And we can also take away that this is just another example of him remembering something. But at the end of the day, what context does this give us to present day Ptolemy? Like, what does this add to what we know about him already that we didn't already know and that seems pertinent to the story? And I can't think of it. Like, I don't know why he told us this or why they showed us this, especially when they then go and have him tell that same story to Robin. So it's like, okay, now we've heard this, we've seen the story and we've heard the story. And I don't get, is this, again, like I complained about this in a previous episode, like, okay, we get it. You remember shit. Like, we don't have to hear this over and over. Remember something important. Is this another example of them just showing that he remembers some shit in detail? Because he's giving, like, names and shit. Like, he remembers something in detail. Whoop-de-fucking-do. We established that this motherfucker remembers shit. Like, can we let that go? So, like, what was the point of this? I'm hoping in the finale, some of these scenes these flashback scenes are gonna make a lot more sense. Like the scene where we see the little girl that comes over to his house. We find out that's Maud. He mentions, I think in this episode, that he liked a girl named Maud. Like what is gonna be the point of that? Like what happened? Well, we know what happened to Maud, but like what is that? What impact is that going to have on present day Ptolemy? It just seems like it's just like, hey, here's some fucked up things that happened in this guy's life in the past. Is that really the point of the flashback scenes that weren't Koi Dog leading us to the treasure? Were all of these scenes just to show us that he had a fucked up childhood? Like, again, that's fine if his fucked up childhood comes into play in this final episode. I'm wondering how that's going to work out, because they're kind of doing something similar on Better Call Saul, but you know that's going to make a difference. What they're doing is they're showing. They open up each season with this scene where we see Saul Goodman from Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad in the future post the events of Breaking Bad, whereas Better Call Saul is all prior to the events of Breaking Bad. And I am very comfortable with Vince Gilligan and that crew in knowing that at the end of Better Call Saul, these flash forward scenes with Saul are going to mesh with the main story of Better Call Saul nicely, provide some context to that story, but also provide closure to what happened to this guy after the events of Breaking Bad. I'm cool with that. What are these scenes at the beginning of these episodes, these flashbacks? How are they going to tie in to the end of this series? Or are they just there just to be there? Like, hey, here's a flashback to when he was a kid and fucked up stuff happened. Like, I don't know. I don't like scenes for the sake of scenes. So I hope that these things tie in. Or maybe I'm missing something. Nobody's watching these fucking videos. But if you are watching this video and you have an idea or a theory, or you just have a feeling on what these scenes mean and why they're in the show, feel free to let me know in the comments. So I will see you guys probably Saturday for the finale. There's a whole lot going on Friday. I'm trying to work together a plan. A couple of shows, including this one, are dropping off on Friday. This one and Severance. So Fridays can get back a little bit back to normal, but with me going into the office and there being so many things that are released on Fridays, I don't really know how this is going to play out, but we'll see. And until whenever that is, peace.